Hello, this is Peter Cox, host of Pop-Up Submissions. I just wanted to say before the show begins, we did have some technical problems this time. I'd like to sincerely apologise for those and assure you that next week we will be back to, well, whatever passes for normal. And now, let's get on with the show. Yeah, great guests, great submissions, a spectacular genius room. Let's rock. And here we go. First submission of the day comes from Ro. Are you there at the moment, Ro? Let us know if you're on YouTube. You probably are not in the Genius Room. I very much doubt that. But you might be live on YouTube. If you are, give us a wave, please. Ro's submission is called Convergence. It's YA fantasy. There's a QR code there. You can go to Ro's website. Meanwhile, I'm going to read you Ro's blurb. The discovery of an ancient scroll starts the part dryad Princess Shari on a journey to discover where she fits in, how to control her powers, and who is trying to kill her. Sounds a good one. This is about Ro. I have a BA in English. How about that? Emphasis creative writing from Western Washington University that I completed a few months before my 50th birthday. I'm the mother of 4 teenagers, several of their friends, and 2 cats. Convergence is my debut novel, but a short story I wrote for Swoop Books competition, placed and was published in their Ordinary People anthology. My wheelhouse is sci-fi/fantasy, but I also adore everything from mystery to adventure, except westerns and horror. All right, that's very comprehensive, and even more comprehensive, not to say brilliant, reading for you from Ali.
Convergence by Roe, read by Alison. Even arrows have a purpose, Shari mumbled under her breath as she notched the arrow. The morning was perfect for archery practice, the air still, the warm sun on her exposed neck, her hair out of the way in a braid wound around her head. She took her stance and pulled back on the string, her brother's ratty hand-me-downs giving her a greater range of motion than any of her gowns possibly could. Sighting the bullseye down the long sweep of bright green grass, she narrowed her focus to the centre circle. Blocking out the endless blue sky, she ignored the white blossoms and pink buds exploding on the last row of apple trees in the back orchard. Inhaling, she refused to allow the scent of rose and jasmine from the castle's ornamental gardens and the lavender and mint from the kitchen gardens distract her. She slowly exhaled and loosed the arrow. It hit the target with a thwack. Shari drew another arrow from the quiver. Nothing was satisfying. She needed something but couldn't tell what. Even her hard-won archery practice didn't give her the lift it used to. Until her 16th birthday and her coming-out ball in a few weeks, she could only attend a few small, well-chosen ones. Usually the idea of going to a ball set her blood racing with anticipation, but even they had grown boring with the same giggling gaggle of girls. Thwack! The same painfully pontificating princes. Thwack! The same manipulating matchmaking mamas. Thwack! What was wrong with her? Riding had grown boring too, with the same horses. Thwack! The same trails. Thwack! And the same bodyguards. Thwack! She was itching in her skin to go. The pull to leave was overwhelming. She longed to throw her quiver and bow over her back and just take off. She was already dressed for it. But where could she go? What could she do? Working out some of this restlessness, she walked to the target to retrieve the arrows with hard, swift steps. The apple trees in the orchard off to her right, as ordered as her father's soldiers on parade. Being banished to the hinterlands of the castle grounds for her archery lessons and practice still grated. Her mother's gentle voice had explained, "Your father has given his permission and commissioned a bow for you, but there are conditions. There are always conditions. Your lessons will take place in the back parts of the orchard, where you can't hurt anything, and they will occur in the mornings, while most of the court is still in bed, before the gardeners start work on that part of the grounds." Right, I wouldn't want to inconvenience the gardeners. She hadn't said anything out loud, but Shari suspected that her mother could read her mind. Before she could open her mouth to protest, her mother had continued, with a sigh which Sherry was sure came from having to deal with a difficult daughter. "It's not as if we are keeping it a secret. Your father just doesn't want to flaunt it." It was probably because of how she was dressed while practicing. He tried to convince her to wear a dress instead of Andre's old fraying trousers, boots and tunic. "Gowns are too tight," she'd said. "We'll have the arms loosened." "It's not just the arms. I can't stand, breathe, or move correctly in any of my gowns." She had gotten her way, but so had her father. This restlessness felt like more than just boredom, though. She was being honest with herself. She felt useless. She wasn't necessary or needed for anything, especially not to marry for a royal alliance. Thanks to all the gods and deities out there for that. Her father had an heir and 2 spares. He was a wise and loved ruler. So, as far as she knew, the kingdom was at peace and had good relations with the neighbouring kingdoms. Even if it wasn't, she wouldn't know about it. They never told her anything. There was never anything she was allowed to do. Nothing that mattered, anyway. Movement drew her attention. She stopped, shading her eyes for a better look.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ali, great reading there. Let's have a look at the junior stream, see what they're saying straight away. Title, first of all, Claire says, similar title to Divergence. Of course it is. I was scratching my brains there thinking, what does this remind me of? And yeah, David McGuire says, unusually for a blurb, I'd like more detail here. And Matt says, Convergence sounds like a lot of titles out there. It does, doesn't it? Pamela Jo says, not a great fantasy title. More science fiction on the blurb is too spare to entice readers. Blurb's too vague, says L.A. Thomas. Matt goes on to say, blurb could use a couple of details to stop it coming across as a bit generic. L.A. Thomas says, Convergence made me think of Divergence. Yeah, so that's quite a big deal, I think. Blue says, blurb's clumsy at the start with the hyphenation. Good point. Pamela Jo, the writer's bio shows this author can write engagingly, needs to bring that to the blurb. And Jan says, I don't mind Convergence, but maybe add something else to it. Blurb needs more. Right, well, let's see, before we come back to the Genius Room, let's see what Bev thinks.
Well, I rather enjoyed it. I thought it had nice flow. I wasn't mad about the title, but it was okay. The blurb needed more. You just needed more. It wasn't saying this is special and this is why. It was just describing the usual sort of adventure. And I thought there's probably more in this book than that could give us a bit more of a hook into the story. That opening line about even arrows have a purpose, it seemed to then drift a little bit to not really knowing what that was connected to in her head. And I felt I needed to know the context for that thought a little earlier than sort of a page and a half further on, where she starts talking about she hasn't got a purpose, but it was like 2 pages further in, and I thought that was too far. There was some nice alliteration, wasn't there? Manipulating matchmaking mamas was really rather fab. And I like the way there was some nice things. She'd gotten her way, but so had her father. That was like, yeah. So I felt pulled along, but I felt it took a little too long. And if it was me, I would maybe move the bit about the ball, because I thought the interesting bits were the arrows and the fight she'd had to put up with her father and her mother to get to be able to do that. And then bring in something that starts stirring the pot and bringing the action. And we can hear about the balls later and the manipulating mamas. Don't lose it. It's such a lovely line.
Yeah, we've got to get embedded in the story. Let me just ask you about age. What did you think about the language and the age? Because this is YA. Did you think that was right?
YA. I thought it was YA by her attitude, more so than by the writing.
Okay.
There was that sort of slight pissiness, and she's just firing off arrows and having a good moan, and that felt YA. And I thought immediately that would be someone a reader of that age would like, and certainly for the more competent readers as well, the ones who like some good prose, I thought this would work for. So
fantastic.
I gave it nice marks.
You certainly did. That's great. Thank you very much, Bev. Let's see what you thought, Jack.
The good news is I think Roe can write really well. There are elements in this. The alliteration that Bev pointed out was really nice. I think the bit where she interposes sentences in a thwack, sentence, thwack, sentence, thwack, that's just really nice tone to it, really nice rhythm to it. Things like that I think are really important, because partly what you've got to do is stand out from everything else. And so I think she writes really well. There was nothing in the writing that put me off. I'll tell you what is a problem for me, though. A couple of things. The first thing is it's very generic. A princess, tomboy princess, rebelling against the father who wants to arrange marriage. If you're going to do that, and lots of people do it and do it successfully, then I think you have to have something that stands out in it. Something that makes a difference, something about her personality or about the situation. We don't know the world yet. We can, in my in my mind, is kind of medievalist situation, the bows and arrows and stuff. But maybe there's more than that. It's a YA fantasy. Maybe there's other elements. Something needs to come in earlier to break that just generic picture.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The second thing I was going to say, the first line, even the arrows have a purpose. I mean, maybe this could be the point at which she begins to show the character of the protagonist. Arrows definitely have a purpose, not even. They're there to smash into people's bodies, to break bones, to find and seek the organ that will end their life. It's a very definite purpose to arrows. And to miss that, I think misses the point of, it's about getting that cutting edge, the sharpness, and I think that's what's missing from this beginning. I think the craft is there, and I marked it highly on the craft, but I think the other elements are a bit off for me. So sorry, Rob, but really good news.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we are of a mind on this, actually. Gina Shim says, Matt says, wow, great reading. It was actually from Ali. All Ali's readings are great. Pamela Joe. David McGuire says, took a while to get going, but this thwack stuff is great. Just what Jack said too. Blue says, I really like the thwacks of frustration. Maybe a bit overdone, though. Maybe you want thwack too many. Don't know. Claire G says, there's a good voice here. A good sense of Sherry's mood here. Eva says, I like this type of writing. Eva doesn't say that about everything, but she's saying about you. Interesting, James says, for YA, this might be enough to pull them in. Pamela Joe says, I'd like to see another setup. Than the tomboy princess confined by gowns for these YA novels. Yeah, that too is a bit generic, and that was a comment earlier. Elliot Thomas says, I like the voice. There's a lot of people saying, and the writing here, good job, pleasantly surprised after the blurb. And David says, David McGuire, lots of unnecessary words between the action and the speech. It's weighing it down. Yeah. R. Burnett, I like the writing, just not sure it grabbed me quite as much as it should have. I agree with that. Jay says, hello, Jay. Jay says, really enjoyed this. Chandler Jules, great reading, not drawing me in to read more. Want me some conflict. And Mel says, premise is very exciting, but unfortunately title doesn't do it justice. And that's so true, isn't it? Let's look at the numbers here. You've got an overall 60 there, Ro. And it is interesting. I mean, what we do here on Pop-Ups is we've got these four, we have to generalize a bit. So we've got these four main categories, right? Your title, which is so important commercially. A lot of people overlook that, or they think, I don't know, I'll think about that later, never get around to it. Got your blurb, which is so important these days, especially on Amazon. And then we've got the writing craft itself and the overall commercial potential, which is the bang. So you see, out of those four factors, the title and the blurb fully account for 50% of the marks we give, right? Now, that may or may not be more or less correct. I think it is more or less correct. But it just illustrates how important those two things are. And if one or both of those are a bit low, then your overall marks are going to be low too. But you got a 60. I hope you're pleased with that. Let us know.
Leave a comment for today's authors on YouTube. They want to know what you think.
They do. And let me just say also, we've got a video out there now, because many writers are confused about literary agents. People like me, what do they do? Do you need one? Get your book published? How can you get one? Well, I've recorded a short video, and it answers many of these questions that writers have got about agents, and it's yours for free on YouTube right now. But we would appreciate a like and subscribe, please. Yeah, not too much to ask. Can you do that? Great. Let's look at submission number 2. The Trouble with Prophecies, fantasy from Jake. Is Jake with us? If you are, give us a wave on YouTube while I read your blurb. The Trouble with Prophecies. The Chosen One, this is quote, the Chosen One is a tired old tradition that needs to find its place in the pages of history. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the Chosen One doesn't want to be chosen? Okay, that's quite a long quote. Don't know who it's from. Derek, the last wizard in the world, is the right starting blurb again, actually, isn't it? Derek, the last wizard in the world, has had his fill of prophecies. In his experience, they cause nothing but trouble. So, when he's dragged onto a quest to find the latest Chosen One, he does whatever he can to get out of it, even if it means stirring up more trouble in the process. I like the sound of this, actually. Yeah, I like the sound of it. I would read it, and we are in a minute going to, but before then, I'll tell you about Jake. Teaching assistant by day, says Jake. Exhausted by night. No wonder. Not quite a superhero, but I do defeat villains by proxy. This is my second submission to the illustrious pop-ups. My first offering received mixed feedback. Oh dear. And I'm hoping this new tale will do better. Right. I hope it will too. And if it's going to, it might be because of this rather amazing reading from Mal.
The Trouble with Prophecies. Written by Jake. Read by Mel. 1. Smoke and fire filled the horizon, sending great, billowing clouds of ash into the sky. The fields disappeared behind it, the animals fled in its wake, and the sky dimmed as the sun struggled to pierce its veil. For the people of the village, it was the end. For Derek, it was Thursday. The smoke choked the small woodland clearing and seeped in through the window of his short tower, filling it with an acrid stench. Derek sighed. It would take weeks to get the smell out of the drapes. He finished watering the plant on the sill, taking a few moments to inspect its leaves for pests, before closing the sash to keep out the smoke. The stench lessened, but the screams, though muffled, could still be heard from the village in the valley. Ignoring it got easier over time. Something he never thought he'd say at the beginning, but the more villages that burned, were destroyed, the less it bothered him. Now it was just part of the world, the way things were. Moving away from the window, he sat in a chair by the fireplace and turned to a book and pipe resting on a table beside it. He lit the pipe with a click of his fingers and flicked through the pages of a book as another loud scream cut through the shouts of men below. "I do wish they'd do it more quietly," he grumbled, turning the page again. If experience had taught him anything, it was that the raid should have been over by now. Perhaps they're getting better at defending themselves. Or perhaps their new legionnaires are simply inept. Whatever the reason, they were being too noisy about it. He snapped the book closed and waved his fingers in a rough circle, creating a portal in the air at shoulder height. He tossed the book through before reaching in and drawing out another. "The Erotic Adventures of Sir Hannah Higby," he read. "No thanks." He tossed it back, hoping to pick a better book on his second go. "You up there!" someone shouted outside. "You in the tower! Come out!" Derek almost dismissed the voice. The Legion rarely bothered him. Most of them knew better. "Come out, or we'll drag you out," the voice called. Derek snapped his new book closed and stood. His fraying grey robe unfolded to his ankles as he marched to the window, threw open the sash, and glared down at the men gathering at the foot of his short tower. There were 7 of them, all wearing standard issue Dark Legion armor, black plate with red chainmail beneath. More pillaged the settlement at the foot of the hill, burning, looting, and generally being unpleasant. If they thought that sort of behavior was going to continue at his tower, they were sorely mistaken. What? I'm trying to read, snapped Derek. The officer, Derek assumed he was an officer, his armor was a bit nicer than the others, seemed confused. He must be new. Come down, repeated the officer, or we'll come and drag you out. Not a good idea, warned Derek. You'll never get through the door. Best move on and leave me be. What is this insolence? Insolence? No, I was being apathetic. Now go away and leave me alone. With that, Derek closed the sash and went back to his chair by the fire, but before he could get immersed in the wizard's maid, a muffled argument broke out outside. When it had come to an end, a brief pause was shattered by a loud scream that rang through the air. Derek tutted and returned to the window. I told you wouldn't get in the door, he jeered. It's charmed. Only a person with magic can get in, so bugger off. Below, one of the soldiers nursed the charred stump of what used to be his forearm, while 3 others helped him to his feet. The officer glared up at the window and signaled for the men to bring a ladder. Oh, for goodness sake, you think I didn't charm the window too? Damn, why do I always forget the window?
Thank you, Mel. It was as good as I expected. Oh, always is, actually. Genistream Matt says, trouble with, ... Ellipse says, is forever tainted by Star Trek. Of course it is. Yeah, Ellie Thomas says, I quite like the title. Hello, Jake. Good to have you here. Nice that you're with us. Dave McGuire says, chosen one doesn't want to be chosen in at least half the stories. Ooh. Pamela Joe says, Annie, good to see you. Yes, Annie's with us. It's great. Elliot Thomas says, start the blurb with Derek. The top half can be lost. Matt says, very solid blurb, makes us want to pick it up. James says, like the title and blurb, except chosen one sounds used. Chandler Jules, strong blurb, intriguing title. Eva says, title needs more fizz. Hi, Bernard. Not sure we need the quote on the blurb. I think it's a bit long. Jan says, blurb's good. Blue says, I would start with the second half of the blurb. Title makes me curious about what's inside. And Claire G says, great opening paragraph. Ali Thomas, like the second half of the blurb, maybe a bit more idea of the stakes, trouble to finish it off. Love the humour, says James. Very important, that. Matt says, nice opening graph. And Blue says, great comic twist at the beginning. Claire says, great sense of Derek's character. And Matt says, nicely dark humour. I'm wondering if it's the sort of humour that appeals to Jack.
Yeah, it did. And not just the humour. I thought Derek's characterisation and what came out through his kind of sarcasm in his dialogue was good. And you can see a real character developing there. I thought that was really strong. I'll tell you what I really liked about this, though, is you have the kind of opening. You have 2 separate narratives. You have the routine, boring, he's picking out a book to read, turning the pages, but he knows that a village just beyond or just within earshot is being destroyed. People are being murdered and pillaged and killed and so on. And so you have those 2 things running alongside, and he treats them both as completely routine. You know, and I really loved the end of the first paragraph where it said it was just people in the village. It was the end for the people in the village, but for Derek, it was just another Thursday. You know, and that kind of sarcasm and irony, whatever you want to call it, continued, and that was good. And I gave the whole piece much more depth than, you know, just the normal tropes of fantasy. And I think, you know, that was the thing with Rose. With Rose, it was the trope and nothing to distinguish it from the trope. This had the trope, you know, you could, the magician and so on, you know, the chosen one, like someone in the room said, you know, they're all, you know, repeated formulas, but it's always with these things how you do it. You know, and you can do it successfully, even if the story has been told 100 times before. And I think this was good for that. I think it did a good job.
Good. Excellent. All right. Straight back to the genius room. Gosh, they've got lots to say. Blue says, the annoyed wizard brings a Terry. I was wondering who was going to say Pratchett. Yeah, Jack didn't, actually. I think he was being restrained. But yeah, okay. So our first Pratchett reference from Blue, the annoyed wizard brings a Terry Pratchett vibe. Very much compliment. He says, James says, starts with world building, throws in humour. Then his world is interrupted. Pamela Jo says, be more Terry. This is definitely not the humanity of Pratchett. Matt says Pratchett-esque, isn't it? Claire G says, this is funny. David says, David Nguyen, I'm liking the humour in the setup, but this is managing to lose my interest a bit. Yes, I know. I felt that a bit too. It's taking too long. Blue, apathetic, on-the-nose dialogue that works. Annie says, great reading from Mel. Of course it is. Burnett says, I really like the casualness of the pillaging. The humour is really great and threaded throughout. And Jay says, I think I'm going to like Derek. Thoroughly enjoyed this. Love the humour. A fun read, says Mel, our narrator, although I tripped a little over a few bits. Right. All right. Bev, go for it.
Well, I like the title a lot. I think it sets up the wry tone that you then encounter in the book properly. The blurb felt like two. It felt like sort of like an explanation tagline about the chosen one, and then a blurb.
Yeah.
And out of the two, at the first bit, I think you only needed perhaps the chosen one doesn't want to be chosen as your tagline. I don't think you needed the whole quote. I saw the cross between Arthur Dent and Rincewind. So for me, it was Douglas Adams meets Pratchett, but becomes Jake's book. And I love the humour in this. I love this. It felt very British, which I really enjoyed. It felt, all that bugger off and leave me alone. It felt very down to earth, which was very enjoyable. But I did think it went on a bit too long because Jake, you told us that he'd got used to ignoring it. Maybe he didn't at the beginning, but he got used to it now. But then you show us him ignoring it. And we don't need both. The showing us would do fine. So you could get us to the dialogue bits with the guys outside much sooner, because that's got gold dust in it. I thought some of the interchanges there were really lovely, and getting to them just that bit quicker would sharpen this up for me. Yes. So this is why it's not. I mean, lovely things like the guard who he must be new because he hasn't figured out what the deal is here, and there's that lovely world weariness that's coming across very cleverly, I thought.
I just want to ask all three, well, actually two guests, including me, that would be three. Maths was never my strongest point, about this Pratchett thing, because it was inevitable that someone mentioned Pratchett, and just about everyone has. So Pratchett was a long time ago now. And there have been lots of people who have tried to imitate Pratchett to greater or lesser success. Do you think, first question, guys, maybe you go first, Jack. Do you think Pratchett is still relevant to the 21st century where we are now? Do you think his sort of sense of humour speaks to today's reader? Or if not, what do you think would replace Pratchett?
No, I think it does. It's not just Pratchett, is it? Start going back Monty Python and the Goons, and so every generation has that kind of weird, off the wall, humor, and this generation, well, I don't know whether that's Z or millennial or whatever we're calling it these days, will produce their own. But that style of humor, I think, definitely works, whether or not people, and I think people will continue to pick up Pratchett's books, but whether or not, people treat today's subjects, today's issues with that humor, that's the key. And I think people will. And I think that's what will keep it going.
Thank you, Jack. Bev?
To me, Pratchett's a bit of a god. So, how very dare you suggest?
Yeah.
I mean, but I was with my nephew a few weeks ago, and he's just discovered Pratchett, having been given the Tiffany Aiken series when he was a teenager to read. He's now discovering the adult books. So I would say yes, there's definitely still a place for them out there. They're still being discovered.
I remember the first time I realised the power of Pratchett. I was sitting on a London bus, top deck. There was a young guy in front of me, probably about 25, so kind of really sort of, rough suit, and he'd just come out of the IT department or something. He's got a sandwich in one hand, he's got his Pratchett in the other, and he was pissing himself with laughter. And I thought, wow, this is good. This is good. Do you honestly, do you think that kind of humour is still going to appeal to today's 25-year-olds, sir?
Oh, I hope so. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. But with dealing with today's issues, that's the thing, But yeah, absolutely.
Okay. David says in the Genius to my 15-year-old, so this answers the point I make, usually into YA sapphic fantasy, devoured Good Omens with relish, and Mel says Pratchett has got to be one of the most universally loved British writers. Why? Well, actually, Mel, people have got PhDs actually trying to work out why. So I'm not sure about that, whether you should do Terry Pratchett at a sort of PhD level, but he has been academically analysed. And one of the things that they like about him, apparently, is his metafiction. And I'm going to leave it there. Metafiction. Wow. Let's look at the numbers. 69, Jake. That's a very good score. 69. I don't think it's quarterly up to our quarterly winner yet, but it's very, very close. Hopefully you're pleased with that. You've got any questions, thoughts or comments, Jake, on us, on the things that have been said to you about you in the Genius Room? Let us know. And we go to, I think we'll go to submission number 3, shall we, actually, before we have a little chat with Jack and with Bev. Here we go. Oh, yes, I think Isaac is very keen that we should go to submission number 3, for it is his. Yeah, Isaac Abraham, YA sci-fi. It's called Elimination Wedding. Nearly tripped over that. Elimination Wedding. Nice distinctive title. A little hard for me to say. Elimination Wedding. Does it work for you? I'd like to know. Here is Isaac's blurb. Elmo Stockley's Elmo Stockley's doesn't want to die alone. But thanks to a genetic apocalypse, there aren't enough girls to go round. To prove he's the best guy for his gal, Elmo must defeat hundreds of other suitors in a sadistic televised contest. What's worse, the high-ranking alpha suitors don't play by the rules. If the alphas discover that Elmo was Wendy's best mate growing up, they'll make him disappear off camera. But if Wendy never learns Elmo entered her trials, it's getting confusing. He'll be just another faceless contestant with no athletic ability or combat experience, and the life expectancy of a one-legged wallaby. Elmo's only chance is to break into the top 20, earn a private dinner with Wendy and warn her not to reveal their history. No big deal, just beat 480 genetically improved lads in dozens of deadly challenges while pretending to be someone else. Wow. It's a long blurb, actually. I'm 41, says Isaac. I've lived in Europe, currently work for an airline in Philadelphia. Like Elmo, I grew up feeling inferior to my peers. I hope this story resonates with those struggling with similar issues. Not unknown amongst writers, actually, Isaac, far from unknown. What is not inferior is this reading from, yes, she's with us live, but she's also with us recorded, this reading from Bev.
Elimination Wedding by Isaac Abraham, read by Bev. You've reached the expected age of transition. Would you like to end adolescence and begin courting Wendover? Elmo clicked yes and tore a fingernail off with his teeth. The pain barely registered over the emotions ripping through him. On the screen, a list of Wendy's suitor preferences appeared. Elmo skimmed it, noticing things like English speaker, no ear hair, and good with lizards. At the bottom, in bold letters, it read, "By checking this box, I certify that I meet these conditions or am willing to submit to appropriate gene modification. I understand that if I do not fit these requirements, I will be much less likely to successfully court Wendover." Elmo checked, "I understand." A new window popped up, 10 pages of maliciously small print. The government won't be held responsible in the event of an untimely death. There's no guarantee of successful courting. Surrender all preconceived notions of morality, blah, blah, blah. Elmo scrolled to the end. I understand. Your request has been submitted. The Ministry of Mail Management will contact you shortly. You have 24 hours to change or cancel your application. Elmo logged off the terminal and walked home, rapping quietly to himself, oblivious to the trail of blood dripping from his finger. The mailman came 2 days later, flanked by a pair of adolescence police. We must have the wrong flat, the ministry official said when Elmo opened the door. The generously eyebrowed man squinted at a clipboard and patted his head for glasses that weren't there. I think you're looking for me, Elmo said. Themistocles Candyson, right? The APs shared a glance. One of them sighed and switched off his red flashing hat. The other wore no cap and had a face almost too pretty to be male. The mailman flipped papers, mumbling about gnat-brained interns. Elmo steadied himself against the door in a weak attempt to act casual. This was really happening. He took a slow breath through his nose. The hallway smelled like musty towels, cologne, and hints of various body fluids. He was going to miss it. Maybe not the jockstraps stapled to the walls or the midnight paintball attacks, but this last year at the adolescent colony had been one of the best in his life. Elm, came Blake's groggy voice. Who's there? It's the crack of sparrows fart outside. Sugar vendor, Elmo replied. Go back to sleep. He opened the door wider to step into the hall, but the 3 officials took that as their cue to enter. One of the APs flipped the light switch, causing a chorus of disgruntled groans from the 3 other boys in the dorm room. The mailman found his glasses in a pocket and studied Elmo. Sweet baby corn, in all my years, a 19-year-old transfer. Blake fell out of bed and staggered over in his boxers. Hold up, gents. What are you on about? The AP illuminated his strobe cap again. Apparently their situation now merited the battery drain. Seems your mate requested a transfer. Rubbish, Blake said. Why would he do a flaming stupid thing like that? Lead butterflies collided in Elmo's stomach, but he didn't second-guess his decision. In 30 hours, he had only grown more confident he'd made the right choice. What's the point of waiting, Elmo said, pulling on a pair of neon trousers. I know who I want to fight for. Blake stared. Wait, you really did put in for transfer? His red hair wasn't as bright as his, Elmo's, but it was easy to tell that they were from the same female. Chance and Clint were out of bed now. Both were younger than Elmo and much better looking. Truthfully, Elmo led the family in aesthetic impairment. Except for the littlest back home in Huddersfield, Ericale resembled an obese caterpillar. Blake's face flushed. He had a right to be angry. Elmo should have told his brothers sooner. But he hadn't wanted his last days with the family to be fraught with arguments and lectures. You're going to trials right now? Clint asked. Corking? Elmo smiled. At least someone was happy for him.
And I will thank Bev in person in a moment for that brilliant reading. Before then, we look at the Genius Room. Lots of great comments here. Claire says, blurb's overwritten, needs to be simplified. Mel says, blurb sets us up for a funny read. LA says, trim it by a third. Blurb's too complicated, reads like a mini synopsis. Yeah, I think that's a general message, actually, Isaac. So there is a blurb. Shall I just stick this thing on? Yeah, I can probably do that, actually. There is this blurb, quite a long seminar that's not free. Quite a lot of YouTube stuff is free. This is not free. It's only $19.95. It is free to full members in Litopia. You might want to take a look at that. That might be useful to you. Jay says, why doesn't Elmo just go ahead and date Wendy if he already knows her? That is a very good argument, actually. Why compete? The blurb isn't too clear and a bit confusing. Arbanet says, not sure having a main character with a name like that, too difficult to pronounce, works out well. That's an issue. David says, it's a voicey, funny blurb, but way too much detail. Chandler Jewel says, title okay, blurb too long. And he says, sounds like Incels meets The Selection, in a funny way. He does sound like that, doesn't it? Matt says, how can Bev be in two places at once? Oh, she'll explain in a moment. Unusual title, says Eva. Arbanet says, the blurb confuses me quite a bit. Pamela J says, kind of not liking the girls don't seem to have any say in this. But our prizes, yeah, there's a sort of sexual politics thing there. One or two things I want to mention about that too. Oh, says James, good with lizards. Bev is live and pre-recorded, says Mel. They're arguing over that. I love it. Eva says, not sure if this is comical or what. Yeah, it's supposed to be funny. And Matt says, good with lizards made me laugh out loud. It did me too. Love Bev's reading, says James. This is drawing me in, says Annie. Gives sci-fi, but recognisable. Yeah. Blue says, start the blurb with the last third. They're still thinking about the blurb, actually, so that really does need sorting. I think it gives a more accurate view of what we see in Chapter 1. Setting a clock, says Matt, is a great way to create a bit of drama. And David Maguire says a bit more work on punctuation could make this a much easier read, but it's imaginative and fun. Right, Bev.
Yeah, I did enjoy reading this, but it was quite difficult, and I suggest you read it, get a friend to read it aloud to you and see where they stumble, because there are some difficult bits in this. I thought the title, I'm sorry, I think it's terrible, because it just reminds me of bowel movements.
Well,
I'm going to put it there. I'm just going to put it there. So
yes.
I you know,
but let's put it like this: it would stick in your mind, though, wouldn't it?
Oh, don't do that. The blurb is not bad, but it's not right. It's got too much in it. The beginning's good, the end's good. You need to cut a lot out the middle. It feels like we've been told most of the story, and we just want to be teased into the book. We don't need to know that much. Plus, you made it sound too much like the Hunger Games with the televised contest, and therefore, I think you're doing yourself a disservice by doing that.
You can't really remove that aspect, though, because that is one of the central, themes, isn't it? Really, it's a reality TV show. You might not want to put it in the
blurb, though.
Okay.
You might want to play. Might not want to make that link quite so obvious in your back cover.
Yeah.
There were some lovely bits though. Good with lizards, and having that so early on was great.
Yeah.
And having to tick a box that says you submit to gene modification. It's like, oh gosh, what's this poor kid putting himself in for? So there were some little absolute gems in there. And I thought the dialogue particularly felt very natural. But I found the whole idea of it, of all these guys competing for one girl, a bit creepy.
Yeah.
Which is why I marked the bang down a bit, because I think that might be a slightly hard sell. But I thought the writing was extremely competent and enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sexual politics, and we do need to talk about that, actually. This is making me chuckle, says Claire. Bev's got just the right tone of voice for this, says Mel. And Matt says, I like the way the world building is dripped in. Jay says, it's the crack of sparrow fart outside. What's that mean? I was amazed to see that. It's actually at the very sort of latest. It's a World War II expression, soldier's expression. Might go way back before then. But I haven't heard anyone say that, actually, for like 50 years or so. No.
Never heard it either.
No, you haven't heard it, actually, Jack, really? Yeah, I think I read it in Biggles or something when I was about 6. Dave McGuire says, I'm trying to work out if this is trying too hard to be funny. I'm enjoying it, but I want a whole book of it. Yeah. But it says, is there something a bit Clockwork Orange about this, or is it me? No, there is that thing going on in the background, actually. Hannah says, hello. Sorry, I couldn't She's too busy writing to join us. Good heavens. But Mel says, the same female? What are they? Animals? And Claire says, this has become a tad long-winded, but I like it. I'm not finding this exchange interesting, says Annie. Blue says, quote, it's a man's world. Yeah. Burnett says some of the sentences are a bit clunky and could do an edit. And Annie says, I think you'll have to establish women as more than just females early on if you don't want to put off some readers. I think that's the thing. Yeah. Mel says some questionable wording, but finding it funny overall. L.A. Thomas says, I quite enjoyed that. It's slightly overwritten, but part of me wonders if we're starting the right place. Maybe start with his first fight. And Claire says, I like the world that Isaac's created. Good. Jack.
A couple of things. I think the writing standard overall has been very good today. And I liked, I agree with the points that Bev made in particular about this, but I liked the kind of understated writing of it. It wasn't overblown. It wasn't full of purple prose, and I really liked that. And I think that worked well. The problem for me, the blurb, everyone says, I agree. I think the focus is, but maybe, this is just my thoughts, okay, so reject it, whatever. But the focus is kind of, I agree with Bev, the Hunger Games, Maze Runner is bang up there. And, that's okay to refer to, but not make it look like a repeat of, because, I don't think many people are going to queue up to get that. But what I thought was really interesting and not developed enough was the thing Bev pointed on, in accepting this, in agreeing to this, you accepted gene modification. And throughout the whole piece, there's this, idea or background of genetics. And I assume that they're all competing to be with this woman or lady or girl because there is some genetic thing. And he refers to one of the police who came to take him or visit him or whatever as being from the same mother because of their hair color. I think that needs to be much more pronounced because that's what makes it interesting for me. Not another Hunger Games. We know what happens. People kill each other. The hero survives just about.
Yeah.
What makes this interesting is that other societal questions about gene therapy, gene conversion, all that kind of stuff is, I think, really interesting and could mark out a niche. You can do the whole Hunger Games bit, but you have a bit more weight and depth to it.
Yeah, all right. Let's confront this issue head on, really. So we've got here is a lot of high-ranking alpha suitors competing for a female mate. Right, so this is intended to be YA, and obviously there's a lot of parody in it and so on. But is it going to fit with the sensibilities of today's reader? Or they're just going to find the whole concept to turn off?
I think that's where he needs to give us this more, extensive world building or background or sense of the context, why this is the case and what the situation is. Maybe he's completely opposed to it. He's the rebel that's going to change the system. You know what I mean? But as it stands, she's the prize and they're the competitors. And on its own, that's not so great.
Yeah, well, that's what Hannah says. Hannah says, is this YA? Sexist YA won't sell. Bev.
Well, and that's the problem. Having her as a prize makes her an object.
Yes.
And that is problematic. Because frankly, if there's not many women and there's a lot of men, she could have her pick anyway. Why does she have to wait for a contest for all sorts of people that she might be compatible with to be killed, possibly? Yes.
In that sense, though, you could do it like The Handmaid's Tale is completely sexist, but it's presented in a way that this is the dystopian future that could exist unless we address attitudes today. And so I think if he's brave enough to challenge that, then include that in it, then he's got there's a chance there. I think.
Yeah, so I think that's the way it's got to be presented, as you say. Actually, Jake, it's the context, isn't it?
Yeah, the context has to be there. It has to be addressed. Yeah, it can't just be skidded over and she's the prize, full stop.
Yeah, and David and David McGuire says, David says, he's just gone. Isaac, make sure the reader knows soon that Wendy's just gone again. There's so many good comments here. I said that. Wendy wants to do this. Yes. And David, sorry, no, that was Claire saying that. David McGuire says any more than 1984 is a fascist book, of course. Yes. So I think there is some settling in to be done there. I realised possibly I've gone a bit heavy, actually, a bit high on the title. But it is a title I'll remember. Is it a good title?
I didn't like the title, though.
Well, is it a good title for a YA book? Or people just going to go, ooh?
I immediately thought of the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I think someone in the chat room said, so the Brown Wedding. And you just don't want that, do you?
No.
But I think if he addresses the blurb and the title, then he can change the focus a bit. You know, the way we were talking about, you know, I think that needs looking at maybe. But I think the writing is good and, you know, it just needs a bit of work on the framework, I think, the background, the world building.
And Pamela Jo says, exactly, Bev, it's just creepy, as humour especially. Mel says, flip the switch and make the dude the object. That will sell. Great point, Bev, says Annie. No one's mentioned yet. Actually, yeah, of course, Genius, of course they've mentioned it. The protagonist's name, Elmo. So James said what I thought straight away was Sesame Street. Or is that just me?
No, I saw a little red furry thing.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's kind of nice for an unassuming protagonist, but it's also Sesame Street, isn't it?
I thought Greek, like Aristophanes or...
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Eugenie. Everything's been done, though, true, and I think that might be interesting if written by a guy, says Annie. All right, let's look at your numbers there. You got a 54. So a very wide range of opinions there. Look at me. I mean, I've given you 80% actually for title. Bev has only given 20. Or possibly I've overmarked that. Possibly I've gone too much on that. And again, I can see potential here. I couldn't sell it tomorrow, that's for sure. But I can see the potential of the idea if it goes through the Genius Room suggestions. Yeah, not bad. And after that rather disgusting noise, here's Jack. Jack, it's been a while since we've seen you on the show. You are a native Scouser, which is a word that's not known to everybody. Tell us what a Scouser is, please.
A Scouser is somebody from Liverpool in the northwest of the UK. And the reason is because it was a dish from Norwegian sailors, lobscouse, and the poorest people in the area ate a kind of stew that was called scouse, and so that name stuck to the people of the area.
Exactly. Here we go. And what's your latest book? It's part of a series. Tell us about it.
The latest book is called Before the Storm, and it takes place the day after the Brexit vote in the UK in 2016.
Wow.
And for me, the book is a kind of examination of light and darkness, of which there is plenty in most societies and even in quite a lot of individuals. And so it draws that out. So you can see from the cover, I love the cover, by the way, but anyway, it's 3 working class kids in Liverpool, and there's a burglary involved, the death of an old man, in the kind of historical narrative. And in the present narrative, then one of those guys grown up to be a history professor at the university, he has to untangle the web that was left from his younger days.
Because Liverpool's got a very interesting sort of international reputation. Most Americans I've spoken to actually who come to the UK say, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I want to go to Liverpool. They want to go to Liverpool. There must be a steady stream of Americans going up there. So is this book, the series actually, Liverpool Mysteries, is it just for locals? Is it just regional publishing or what?
No, I think it has a much broader appeal, like you say. I mean, not just because of the Beatles and football and, but Liverpool is a seaport and that defines its character. That and the famine and the emigration from Ireland has defined, the city to a large degree, not completely, obviously, but has a major influence on the city. And that Irish emigration, New York, Boston, so that story of emigration and the integration. So the series goes back and forward between Liverpool and Ireland over the 3 books, and it covers 100 years of Irish history and the history of the relation between the emigrants, if you like, and the diaspora and Ireland itself. So in that sense, it can, I think people who are from that heritage would really get a kick out of it. Beyond that, they're all made of mysteries and they exist in their own right to be read and enjoyed on that level.
Thank you, Jack. So I want to ask you about this. Not that we've spoken about it before. This is all live, remember, guys. But I thought you might possibly have a view or two about the latest news in the UK. We don't normally touch anything vaguely political, but this kind of affects everyone. So the British government, I'm sure you heard about this, is going to crack down.
Yeah.
This is their press release, for heaven's sake. It's not a news report. It's the British government's press release. They are going to crack down, their words, on what they consider to be useless degrees, obviously in the sites are arts and humanities. I'm just wondering if you've got a view on that, Jack, or not.
Of course I have, Pete. And it starts with that they've created a situation where people are going to university and acquiring tens of thousands of pounds, if not more, of debt that they have to pay off in the rest of their life. And the arts subjects, if you like, the arts field and employment that grows from that are drastically underpaid and undervalued by our society. And that is the point. Not that doing an English degree is useless, but that if you do an English degree, your chances of gaining, employment that it enables you to pay off your debt, but also live a decent life is minimal. And the same for historians and geography. And, so those arts subjects are undervalued in society. And the government has created this situation, over decades. And then now they're using...
I mean, we've got an election coming up in the UK, don't know when yet, possibly next year. But it feels to me like this is class warfare, actually. It's like, people
it's
saying...
culture war stuff.
Yeah, culture war. Bev, have you got a view on this?
Oh, I'm totally with Jack and just would love to shake up the government and go, don't you remember what kept us going during lockdown was the arts? It was all about the arts and what they did for us, and the free theatre shows that you could get, and books and recordings and audiobooks and TV and film. That, and music, the culture of it, that's what people turn to in times of difficulty and trouble. And if you start just taking that away, I mean, seriously, you're going to have much more problems long term.
Well,
it's a commodification of society.
Yeah,
sorry, everything becomes an economic transaction.
Well, what they're saying is if it doesn't lead to a decent job after university, it's not a good degree, and they're going to discourage it. They're going to discourage it. But the problem, if you're not sort of working for a hedge fund immediately after your degree, then obviously they're going to try and do something about that in terms of making it more difficult to get onto the degree course in any case. But what puzzles me...
Maybe double the wages of teachers.
Sorry,
yeah, double the pay. Go on, Beth.
I've got a load of student debt because I finished my degree in fine art and creative writing when I was 56.
Really?
So I am that person that they think shouldn't have been allowed to do that and should be discouraged. And it's just like,
well, you are.
Sorry, no.
And Roe, our first author today, is one of those people. And you're one of those people too, Jack, aren't you?
Yeah, I went to university at the age of 40, I think, and came out with a degree at 43. And I left school with no exam results, not even poor exam results, but nothing. Like I had more criminal convictions than qualifications, but you know what I mean?
Well, that's a qualification in its own way.
Yeah. Well, I was geriatric when I went, obviously.
But it just strikes me as remarkable. I mean, if this is serious, it may not be serious. It may be just headline-grabbing stuff, trying to, stop the tide of the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and stuff like that. But if it is serious, it seems remarkably foolish because, it's one of the few industries we've got left, the creative business in the UK. We don't have much manufacturing, but we do have creative industries. And people who populate the creative industries come from universities doing arts degrees. Why do you want to stop that? Does it make any kind of sense to you, even if you don't agree with it, obviously, Jack, but does it make any sense to you?
Yes. The whole point of culture wars is that you bring your people to you and you push away the others that are outside the tent. And the people who are outside the tent are liberals, artists, writers, and the people inside the tent are the people who are going to vote for you. That's, and you just need to mobilize them. Doesn't matter what happens to the others. And they do it with race, they do it with sex, they do it with abortion, they do it with all of these, what they call wedge issues.
Yes. And Blue in the genius room says, Elmo self-immolates. I'd watch that.
And James is calling me out on my age. No, I'm not 56, darling. I'm 64.
He's a gentleman. Interesting comment
I'm
from
way
David.
older.
Yeah, David says, more AI takes over, the more important it is to be able to think creatively and understand humans. They're backing the wrong horse. I think that's true. I think we have to start to say something about it, actually. But anyway, as you know, inside Colony, we don't do politics, but we do submissions, and we have our last submission right now. Hello. Thank you, Isaac. That's great. I'm so pleased it was useful to you. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Hello, Shane. I think you're around. Hello. Yeah, very exciting. Really nerve-wracking. It is. Yes. Well, we don't sort of play on that, but yeah, it is nerve-wracking. Of course it is. Yeah. Shane's got a website there, so you can scan it and go to it. This is mystery. Oh, that's good. Like some mystery, and it's called The Hero Teacher. Here we go with Shane's blurb. The novel combines the small-town Irish mysteries of Graham Norton with the high-stakes courtroom dramatics of John Grisham. What's not to like about that? Well, it's not blurb, but it's a USB, and that's good positioning, definitely. The central character is Joe Healy, a teacher in a small Irish town in Ireland. Yes. Isn't that tautology? Who becomes a national hero when he saves a group of students by hiding with them in a cupboard during a violent incident at his school. 20 years later, Paula Gallagher, a journalist dealing with her own personal challenges after returning home unexpectedly from abroad, is hired by the local newspaper to write an anniversary piece about the incident. How will the small town react when Paula uncovers the dark truth of what really happened that fateful day? I'm liking the idea. The book's core moral dilemma forces participants and the book's readers to answer the question, is it ever justified to take an innocent life to save others? That is a long-term dilemma to which there's been no categorical answer. Let me tell you about Shane, born in the Irish coastal town of Wexford. I've been a journalist for over 2 decades, working across many industry sectors, including as a columnist for a Sunday broadsheet newspaper, a reporter on National Irish Radio, and a department head at Thomson Reuters. I've lived in Dubai since 2008, and in 2015 I was honoured, silent age, to attend Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in New York City as one of the winners of the City Journalistic Excellence Awards representing the UAE. I studied psychology. You've got a great background here. I studied psychology at University College Dublin, and the subject of morals and ethics has always intrigued me. As well as Graham Norton's novels, I also took inspiration from A Time to Kill by John Grisham, and the story also includes a seamless homage to To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Well, I'm liking the positioning here, a huge amount actually, and I think you are going to like this reading from none other than Emily.
The Hero Teacher by Shane, read by Emily. Loch Roe, August 22nd, 2024. Scumbag! The attacker shouted as he dug his boot deep into Joe Healy's stomach. One of the last things Joe remembered as he lay on the ground was a guttural cough and a gob full of phlegm landing on the side of his face. Few people in Loch Roe were surprised when they heard about what had happened. Most were shocked that it had taken as long as it did for word to filter down from the bail hearing in Dublin, and for someone to decide to take the law into their own hands. The attack only came to an end when a pedestrian turned the corner and let his dog off the leash, sending Joe's assailant running down a laneway. The man, a local baker, helped Joe to his feet. Let's get you to the hospital. My car is just only up the street. The small talk on the drive faded to an awkward silence when his good Samaritan introduced himself and Joe told him his name. At the hospital, a dose of heavy medication helped to alleviate the physical pain. A nurse came to check in on Joe as she was doing her rounds. She avoided eye contact and tugged harshly at the bandages. Was she up to date on the latest news, or was this just her usual abrasive bedside manner? Sit up. There was a sharp edge to her voice. Any pain? Other than the cracked ribs and my face swelled up like a peach? Dr. Ryan has the x-ray and, once he's reviewed it, he'll update you. She paused, looking up and down the bed, and finally locked eyes with Joe for a brief second. But we're really busy tonight, and, you know, there's other people to attend to. She shrugged her shoulders. Anything else? Joe smiled at her, but she didn't reciprocate. Yeah, she knew. Lying back, he closed his eyes. The nurse had just left when someone sat down hard on the bed, sending pain shooting up Joe's side. He tried to suppress a scream as he gripped his fist. Shit, sorry, Joe. The man jumped back off the bed. It was his lawyer, Kevin Fitzpatrick, or Fitzy as Joe had called him most of his life. Evening, Fitzy, it didn't take you long to get here. Monica's on duty down the hall. News travels fast around here. Clearly. I've asked them if they can move you to a private room, and they've agreed. There's no need. I'm getting out of here as soon as I can. Joe, you look like shit. You're going nowhere. They need to make sure you've no internal bleeding. Fitzy looked around the room as one of the other patients stirred in their bed. We can't leave you here. Once word gets around town, there'll be a queue down the hall waiting to give you a good kicking. Joe's shoulders sank and his head fell forward. This isn't going to end well, is it? His hand trembled as he rubbed his chest. I spoke to Sergeant Gallagher on the way here. They're sending guard of protection for you, and to the house, for Trish and the kids too. It's not safe. I'm surprised you weren't killed. Joe stared around the room, his heart beating faster at every movement from the other beds. I knew something like this was going to happen eventually. Every day for the last 20 years I've waited for that knock on the door, or the hand on my shoulder. Fitzy pulled up a seat and balanced his briefcase on his knees. There's one other thing. He took out a business card and laid it down on the bed. What? You're bailing? Seriously? Fitzy mouthed some words like he had been rehearsing them, but nothing came out. 30 years, Joe said. I need you. If my own lawyer, my best mate, doesn't have any faith in me, what chance do I have? My boys are already getting grief at school. This is Loch Roe, not a John Grisham movie. And you're no Matthew Bloody McConaughey, that's for sure. Fitzy moved the business card further up the bed, towards Joe's hand. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Emily. So good to hear Emily's readings. Now, I've just been trying to digest everything that the Genius Room have been producing, but obviously I'm not a genius and I can't therefore digest their prodigious output. Anya says, not a fan of the title. Yeah, I think I'm just going average on the title numbers-wise. Claire says, title 2 on the nose. Not quite a blurb, says L.A. Thomas. Start with Joe Healy. Yeah, several other people said that too. I think there's a blurb inside there somewhere. I'm intrigued, says Claire. Eva says, there must have been a huge cupboard to fit all those students. Practical, ever practical, Eva. James says, Wex says, PJ, loved it. Hannah, I like the blurb bit of this blurb. Yes, exactly. Arbiter, not sure how you become a national hero by hiding in a cupboard. Well, intriguing. LA, who's the main character? That's a good. I wondered that too. Who is the main character? Says LA Thomas. Joe or Paula? And I was wondering how you're going to develop that. Yes. I also like the blurb says, Jan, just lose the beginning and the end. There you go. Lots of bangs to this as an idea, says David. I agree too. I've given you high marks for the commerciality. Chandler Jules, interesting premise. Could the blurb be tightened? Yes, it could. Matt says the hero teacher sounds like the endless Netflix series about superhero schools. So yeah, I think everyone... no one likes the title, basically. But could they have hit... Oh, this is about the hiding. They're getting very technical now. Pamela Jones says Wexford. She's waxing lyrical over Wexford. There are more writers, poets, painters here than anywhere else I've lived. Love the creative atmosphere. That's brilliant, actually. Must do a pop-ups live from Wexford. Hannah says Gobful. So long since I've heard that. I like the interiority, says Annie. Blue says raw and rough start gets my attention. Writing's good here, says Hannah. I like the way this starts, says James. Jan, I'm loving this. To what extent are you loving this, Jack?
Quite a lot, actually. I like the idea of it, set in a small town in Ireland. I think that is can be very attractive to lots of different audiences. I think the blurb was a bit... I'm not sure you need to mention Graham Norton. I'm not sure how well that works as a tactic, to put somebody like that in. In America, that certainly wouldn't raise any interest. But anyway, okay. So I think the blurb needs tightening up. I think the premise is good. I like the idea of it. I think books about small town Ireland are very popular, I think, because there's a huge affinity with it. There's the kind of humour of the situation you can see, but it's also quite dark. We don't know what the guy has done to end up in hospital. That, we need to work that out. I thought the writing was good. It flowed really well. I'm a fan of it, I think.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Short and sweet.
Is that enough?
Yeah, it's more than enough, actually. Yeah, you can stop right there. I think Shane's very happy with that. Bev?
I quite liked the title, actually. I didn't have a problem with it. The blurb started off as a pitch, not a blurb.
Yeah.
And there was too much we didn't need to know. After returning unexpectedly from abroad, but we don't care. We don't need to know that.
No, that could have
gone. What we do need...
Yeah.
What we do need is that last bit, when is it acceptable to sacrifice one for the greater good? Yeah. That's the hook. That's your blurb. You've got to focus in on that bit. I found the opening a tiny bit confusing because it jumped backwards and forwards. As in, he's on the ground, but then it had happened, but then it only stopped because a lady came along and stopped or something, and it was like it went backwards and forwards a tiny little bit at the beginning. So for a minute I was like, hang on, what, where, what? And I thought the second line was stronger than the first, actually. I really liked one of the last things Joe remembered as he was lying on the ground was the gobbet of phlegm on the side of his face. And actually I would have opened with that, and I don't think we needed the scumbag because I think the shock was there. And I really I thought, this is really, really competent writing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the writing a lot. We've had some fantastic submissions
we
this
have
week. They've
today.
Been very high quality.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with the writing. What I do have is I have 2 points that I would raise as this is great as long as. And the first one is as long as he doesn't keep us hanging on too long for us to find out what this guy has done. Don't string it out forever because you will lose you've got us interested. You need to deliver on that. And the second one was that it was dated. Sorry?
Sorry, I was just saying, by the end of the first chapter.
Yes. Yeah, I'd agree, by the end of the first chapter.
Sorry.
And the other one was that I noticed it was dated at the top, and it was dated for next year. And I thought, this is going to go straight into flashback in the next bit.
Yeah.
And I would just be careful that you don't keep us with too many unanswered questions too long. We need to get to the crux of the stakes and push.
Yeah.
And I think this writer can do it as long as they're mindful.
Yes. Okay. The genii. Oh my God, there's so much good stuff there. David says, feels like this is starting after the reporter's expose then. Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Interesting, strange place to start the story. Good writing, intriguing setup, said Claire. I'd read on every entry, just what Bev said. Every entry today has been well written. Bev honed in how to fix the blurb, says Pamela Joan. Claire says, my only concern is that if an innocent is sacrificed, that's very dark. And is the tone of the opening nasty enough? I'm not sure where this is actually, what this is really. Let's just talk about that for a moment, guys. Shane says it's mystery, straightforward mystery, and he's comparing it to Grisham, and that's fine. I totally understand that. And then we've got this potential atmosphere of small town claustrophobia, which I rather like actually. Yeah. I think that could be very interesting. And then we've got two possibly fighting protagonists. You've got the teacher himself, and then you've got the reporter. So what am I to make out of this? Which way is this going? What do you think, Jack?
It's hard to tell, but I hope that it's a mystery that includes the claustrophobia you talked about the small town. But small town, but big questions. I think Bev was right to point out that the premise about the taking of an innocent life is central. That should be highlighted. It's really important. Yeah. Okay, separately, but maybe putting the hero in question marks, the hero teacher, might just add a little bit of what's going on here kind of thing. Okay, and I wanted to say before we finish, I'm actually near Wexford in the middle of August.
Oh, really?
At the Gardiner Manor book fair. Gardiner Manor, I think is the pronunciation. Apologies if I've got that wrong. So Shane, you're welcome to come up and see me, and we'll have a chat if you'd like, or contact me through my website. That'd be cool.
That would be so cool. I don't know if Shane's actually in Ireland. I think he might be at UAE at the moment. Oh. But if you, Shane, you're with us now, and you're alive. Tell us. I mean, if you're going to be in Wexford. What's the date?
Well, when I'm going to be there, mid-August, 19th to 20th. It's a weekend kind of book fair.
Well, that's brilliant. All right, and that's I wish I'd known about that actually. Yeah, 19th to 20th of August. Go and have a word. Go and have a little natter. What a good idea. Yeah. So the only other thing I want to add to that, Shane, would be let's see your really good work. So I've said this before a number of times, but it's very important, the first few pages. What is it? Have you identified yet the skill that you've got that just makes people go, oh, that's good? You know, that there'll be something you can do that all writers have got, good at certain things, not as good at others, so you play to your strengths. So what's that thing that you do that make people go, oh, I like that? And whatever it is, put it up front. Make sure it's in the first few pages. When agents like me see it, they'll be lazy. They'll just look at the first few pages. They won't necessarily go through to chapter 10, 20, and so on. Same applies to publishers. So whatever that thing is that you're really good at, get it right up front, right in their face. I don't know what it is. It might be characterization, possibly. I don't know. That would count for a lot with a small town setting. But anyway, let's look at the numbers. 67, Shane. I think the title let you down, and the blurb definitely let you down. Look, everyone's going 60. They're actually junior student going a little bit low on the title. So we don't like the title. If you're going to compare yourself to the likes of Grisham, etc., you've actually got to spend the time, put the mental effort into developing an absolute killer title. You can't afford not to, especially if you're a breakthrough writer. You've just got to do that work. Later down the line, when you're immensely well published and people are saying Shane is the new John Grisham, then you won't have to bother so much about it. But right now, it's terribly important. As I said before, it's 25% of all the votes we give. So we're not big on the title. That blurb is a complete mess. But we all thought there was an element of strong blurb in there, so that needs to be mercilessly pruned and developed accordingly. I hope you're pleased with that, Shane. Oh, he does live in Dubai, right? Shane's just said. Can you see that? Yeah, he does live in Dubai. So, are you going to the Dubai book fair? You're not?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a shame. You pay $200 to an agent? Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work, actually, Isaac. Oh, God. Being on this program was 10 times more helpful. So we'll be expecting your donation for $2,000 any moment then. Thank you. Yeah, of course. Will I split it? Just a little bit. I'll give Jack a bit. I'll give Bev a bit. I will.
We can pay off my student loan, eh?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I was going. Yeah. Bloody hell, student loan. I was going to press the end button, but I can't until we've looked at the numbers. All right. So who is the winner? It's Jake, isn't it? Yes. Let's push that button. Well done, Jake. The new Terry Pratchett, eh? And look, the trouble is a lot of people call themselves that, haven't they? They have. Hopefully you found that useful, Jake. We enjoyed reading it. And, of course, being a show winner, you will go forward to the quarterly winner that we'll be doing, I think, at the end of the next month, actually. So you stand a chance. Everyone stands a chance on pop-ups. But more importantly, we all stand even better chance if you join me same time next week.